We all know about the big successes in Silicon Valley. You read about them, you use their products, you touch these things all the time, and we celebrate them. And what's really amazing is there's a lot of great books you can buy on business, written by someone who was successful at Silicon Valley, espousing just how they did it, their secrets, you know? And the world likes to think about that and copy that. But let me give you the other side of the story. Failure is actually far more often the outcome. There's an enormous amount of money that's been invested in thousands upon thousands of startups that have gone bankrupt. And that's good. That's great, actually, because that is part of the process of innovation that happens there. And what I want to share with you right now is just a few observations, really just two, that come from my experience working in and living in Silicon Valley for a lot of years. So first, let me give you a quick perspective on where I'm coming from. First of all, I am focused tonight in my comments on tech companies. That's what I know, that's where I've worked. A lot of what happens that comes out of Silicon Valley that's big are the tech industry. I'm also focused on product companies. They make something and they sell that thing. There are lots of other ways companies become successful. They might create an app and everyone uses it and then you sell little ads at the bottom of the app. And that's fine, but that's not what I'm talking about tonight. I'm talking about people who say, I'm going to make something and sell it. The next thing I'm doing is talking about venture-funded companies. And why do I specifically call that out? Because the startup world that a lot of people know is made of people who bootstrap something and then take funding because they want to accelerate. So by definition, another thing I'm talking about are organizations that are small but want to get big. I assume that's true. Because there are plenty of small organizations that I get to know and meet where the plan isn't to get big, and that's fine. They've reached their state of how big they want to be, and that's good enough. So nothing wrong with that, but tonight's focus is on that. And by definition, the organizations I'm thinking about and talking about are ones that say we have something innovative that people will love, and that's why we want to grow, because we think we're smart, we've got a good idea, let's see if we can make it big. So how can I talk about all this? Quick background, just to give you a foundation. I have been in technology my entire career. Either I've built products, marketed products, managed products, or sold products. That's all I know. And in the last 20 years, specifically, I focused on startups. I like that culture, the intensity, the live or die by the moment. It's incredible. I had executive roles at 4 of those companies, so I had a chance to really have a direct influence on how they built the company and made decisions. I had a chance to work with fundraising. I raised 10 million here and 18 million there. So I know a lot about working with boards, working with VCs, and really helping to fuel these organizations. I did go to Stanford and earn a few degrees, some in engineering, one of them was an MBA, so I have some good foundation, and that also got me tied in, if you will, to the network of Silicon Valley. And I do some teaching for fun because it's nice and I like that, so I've done some work at Stanford and Menlo and here in Munich at the New European College. I also advise a handful of small startups and provide some advice primarily around sales. So here we go. As I said, there's really just 2 things to talk about right now. There are many things that influence success and failure, but here's just 2 that I think are pretty important. The first one is having customer-centric products. Probably sounds pretty obvious, right? Who would build a non-customer-centric product? I can tell you right now, lots of organizations do, okay? Shh. The second thing I'm going to talk about is the revenue model. And you might think to yourself, revenue model, that seems pretty obvious, right? Once again, no, actually a lot of organizations, especially in the early days, feel they have something. They don't quite know how they're going to make money. We'll talk about that as well. If time permits, I've got more slides. I've got loads of things to talk about. We probably won't get to them all, but I can talk about fundraising, what I call fund spending, you know? How do you get 10 million and then what do you do with it when you get it, right? Another interesting topic that's really pretty fun to go and talk about is managing responsibly, because I've seen both. I've seen people use that funds responsibly, and I've also seen a little, I'll call it careless, use of those funds. There's something I'm particularly fond of called the hedgehog concept. Anyone heard of this thing? It's by Jim Collins, Good to Great. It's a famous book. And we can touch on that later or during the break if we want. Okay, so here we go. Customer centricity. What does that mean? I like to frame it as something that customers love and can't live without. It's so woven into their fabric that they become connected to this product, okay? And I don't mean necessarily personal products. I'm not speaking about what you might use and have in your pocket on your handy. But more, when I work with their software and technologies that go into big companies that help to run technology infrastructure. But either way, it's about products where someone says, I'm going to pay for that. And let me tell you, there's lots of times when people haven't thought that through. How are they going to get someone to hand over money and pay for it? And not just be paying for it, but be really happy and saying, I don't mind if you're attaching me and making this thing really sticky and I'm going to be stuck with you for the next bunch of years. They're good with that idea, right? And that they're like, well, there's lots of us that are using your product, right? There's a big community out there. How can I engage with the community? So that, for me, foundation knowledge, customer centricity. And then there's the revenue model. What is the revenue model? Something which forces, as I say, the financial exchange. What does that mean? That you tell the customer the price. It's clear, it's easy. Believe me, I've worked with lots of organizations where that wasn't super obvious, where it wasn't just made crystal clear to everyone that was engaging. You go to the website, sometimes you go to websites and you can spend a long time trying to figure out, how do I buy this thing? And if I'm going to buy it, what's going to cost, right? By the way, here we don't need a lot of innovation. I think the world has got enough ways that you don't have to really be ultra creative about revenue models. Copy what's out there. Look at other companies. Look who's successful right now. You don't need to reinvent this part. Go with what works. I've worked a lot with what are called subscription models, where you buy on an annual basis or a monthly basis, and it's the gift that keeps on giving. It's a great model, it's a great concept. And there's something out there called the freemium, where you give away some component of what you do, and then you charge an upsell to move to a more premium version or an extended version. And that works really well. But if you're going to go that route, it takes some knowledge and experience, because there's a delicate balance between where you stop giving away and where you start charging, and how that interfaces with your user base, and whether they're going to love you or hate you for the choice you've made of where you draw that line, okay? So how do you become customer-centric? That's the challenge for the day here. From my point of view, being customer-centric means that you look at your customer in very deep detail. Now, I might have a product. In my case, and many times it's been a software product, that I think is going to solve a hard problem. That's a good place to start a conversation. The customer feels some pain, they evaluate alternatives, and they turn to me and they say, I think you might have what I need. But my task only starts there. That's just one small piece of what I have to do on a professional level to actually create a real customer. Because customers, and in particular when you're selling, I'll characterize expensive enterprise software, very costly things, those conversations start with the person who really needs what you've got. But you've got to understand, how are they going to deploy your product? What's the ecosystem that surrounds where my piece fits? How do they buy the product? Most of these companies have professional purchasing teams that are very good at negotiating prices in one direction, down. They have legal teams that will challenge you and say, you have to agree to all of our terms and conditions. What are you going to do about that? Because that is a really important piece, because you could jeopardize your entire company if you sign the wrong agreement, or you don't have the right terms in your agreement. And you can also have issues such as, what are their other choices? What are their alternatives? And a frequent alternative, especially when you say, I've got this new, cool, innovative thing, they're going to say, that's great. We can live without it for now, thanks. Or we've got another guy inside in-house who can build a pretty cool thing. It's not as good as yours, but good enough. We'll skip for now. Come back in a year. Or whatever. So you've got to really in depth, get through those. And that gives you the broad picture, because getting customers and having customers stay is about the broad range of things that it takes to get them on board. Okay, so here's two anecdotes I'll give you. I'm out of time, this is sad. Red Hat, a great brand, technology brand, some of you have heard of it? A couple, yeah, so in the world of software, they took this open source freemium model and they really transformed the world with it by listening to customers. They sold a $29 box of software. And big banks and manufacturing companies said, we want to use this, but we can't. Because our software and our data center cost $2,000 per server. And I can't go to my boss and say, we're going to replace this $2,000 software with the box that costs $29 from some guys that just give out CDs. Why don't you raise your price? Like, make it about like $1,999, okay? And by the way, don't release every 6 months. That's too fast for us. Every 2 years is good enough. And oh, by the way, give us a legal contract with terms and conditions so our legal team and our purchasing team will go, I get it. Now I know what I'm buying. And I kid you not. I'm oversimplifying this, obviously. But I kid you not. That is what the transformation was. That transformed a company like Red Hat from taking this low-cost thing to a very, very high-cost thing and being ultra successful with what's now called Red Hat Enterprise Linux. There's a second story of a place called Elasticsearch. Amazing technology, amazing platform, really easy to get started, and listening to customers who are simply telling them, what I need to be able to do is actually get enterprise-ready tools, and I need to be able to manage logs. And Elastic said, well, we build a search product. They said, we're searching logs. Great, we'll help you to build better logs. Time's up. And there's more.